Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment. Today we have a gentleman by the name of Ben, and I'll let Ben introduce himself to you. As you know, what we do here at Threads of Enlightenment, that we allow our guests to tell us what they're doing today and all of the adventures that they're doing currently, and then we're going to go back and get the backstory that brought them to that place, so that we can extract from that wisdom, principles that anyone listening to our program can utilize and begin their journey and begin to learn about who they are. As you guys know, I say it all the time that this journey is becoming a student of yourself. And so Ben brings much to us, and I am excited. Ben, introduce yourself to the people and let's get to know you even better.
Sounds good. Yeah. So I don't know. I've been a very busy person recently, for sure. So I own a company called Success Improv, where I teach team building using the tools and techniques of improv. And because of
Hmm.
that company, I wrote my first book because I figured, hey, people like authors. They hire them because they somehow know more than other people, right? So I wrote my first book specifically for that company, and it just sort of progressed from there. And I kept wanting to write more and more, we'll call them self-help books or
Hmm.
self-improvement books. And
Hmm.
as I was teaching in my improv, I just kept coming across this point where I would talk about expectations, and I came to the realization that the only reason anybody gets upset is because an expectation hasn't been met. And I was kind of enthralled by that thought,
Hmm.
and I was like, it seems to hold true everywhere I look at it, but it doesn't solve any problems. So I definitely
Hmm.
went to solve that problem and wrote another book around that, which we'll probably get into more. And
Definitely.
I'm a father. I do improv for fun. I'm part of
Hmm.
an improv troupe, and we
Nice.
have a lot of fun doing improv. I'm always just out exploring and trying new things. I'm it's interesting because I was just talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about how certain people are perceived as really interesting. They've led a very interesting life.
Uh-huh.
And if I was looking at my life, I'd be like, wow, that guy's done a lot of stuff. Amazing, amazing stuff. And yet I look at myself and I'm like, meh, right? I don't give myself the credit that a lot of people see.
Yeah.
Because I've flown an airplane on my own, and not
Hmm.
too many people can say that. I'm an
Yeah.
author. I get up on stage and perform, like a lot of things that people would never think of doing, and yet here I am doing them without a second thought. So
Well, that's an interesting skill set from pilot to improv to all of the different things. So author as well. So that I guess from someone looking out, looking into yours, say, "Hey, sounds like this guy's having some fun." And I saw also
yeah,
that you travel a lot. So that's that. There you go.
yeah, I've been to some pretty exotic places on this planet that a lot of people always dream of going to and never do. And so I don't know. I definitely subscribe to Richard Branson's saying, where if an opportunity presents itself, say yes and then figure out how.
How?
Uh,
Yes.
yeah, because sometimes we'll get an opportunity, we'll be like, well, I don't know how to do that, so I'm going to say
Yeah.
no. Well, you just say yes, and then you have time to figure it out.
Well, I mean, we have this beautiful thing called a brain, and we can adapt to different situations. As I told you earlier, that skill set that we utilize and critical thinking, I'm sure we are able to learn as we are tossed into the fire because that's where most of us learn anyway, you know,
Yeah,
in the fire.
exactly. And you know, we we also have the internet that's going to tell us how to do
There you
most
go.
things we want to do in life. Like it's
uh,
amazing the resources we have to just say yes and then go figure it out.
Excellent. So I am excited that you're here because there are a couple of your books that really has sparked my interest because I actually have talked a lot about them, about self-esteem, especially one of the topics that I talk about because I try to educate people on that have low self-esteem is that if you have a low self-esteem of yourself, someone will be able to use you. And they will come and give you all these wonderful words, and they can use that to seemingly build your self esteem, but they have other plans. And unless you you know that person in some cases even are the ones that are closer to you, that hurts you than a stranger, because a stranger you really don't care. But I tell people you have to go on that journey to learn who you are, so that your self-esteem is not based on someone else's opinion of you, but your opinion of yourself.
Absolutely. And personal growth is just it's an ongoing thing, so it doesn't matter where you start with it. It's you
Hmm.
just got to keep going. So I wholeheartedly agree on that.
Yeah, so you told us Ben is an author with several books, but guys, we, as usual, we want to get back to Ben's beginning and find out. I assume that Ben was doing his performance, or what, he was in his 9 to 5 and just existing as we all have been, and then all of a sudden something happens that jolts us out of that quote unquote reality and normal living and normal life, and awaken us to something, saying, wait a minute, if this is normal life, I don't want anything to do with that. So, Ben, can you tell us what happened to you back then? Because it's always a series of things. And because I always tell people they're like little breadcrumbs, and then one day you have this shaking, and because we weren't listening to the all the clues with the breadcrumbs. So tell us about some of those breadcrumbs that you had in your life, and tell us about that shaking that took place that propelled you to where you are today.
Yeah, so there's three distinct points in my adult life that have definitely changed my outcome, if you will.
Hmm.
The first one was I went through high school and college without any self confidence whatsoever. I didn't date. I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't have like all the things that you'd expect a college student to have and do.
Hmm.
And when I got out of college, my parents had done some personal growth work, and they said, "Hey, come to our little graduation ceremony slash event that tells everyone else about what they just did and all that sort of thing."
Hmm.
And the presenter at the front of the room was standing there talking about four sides of a person, like the mental side, the physical side, the spiritual side, etc.
Hmm.
And he got to the relationship side, and it was, he said, "Do you want better relationships in your life?" Now, at the time, I translated that in my own head to, "Do I want a girlfriend?" Right? Right? It wasn't just general relationships with people. It was, "Do you want a
Yeah.
girlfriend?" Right? But hey, I heard what I needed to hear, and I
Yeah.
signed up, and I started doing a lot of personal growth work,
Hmm.
and I was learning a lot about myself and why I was thinking the way I was thinking. And anybody that's done enough personal growth work would definitely say that personal growth work is awareness training,
Yes.
because all you're doing is you're becoming more and more aware of what runs you, why it runs you, and if it's something that you find effective in your life or not. And then
Hmm.
you can choose to do something with it. Personal growth is not a magic wand. It's not the silver bullet. It's not something that's just going to, boom, you're fixed.
Yeah.
It's just simply saying, take a look.
Yeah.
Is it working for you or not? And choose
Hmm.
to do something different. So that was the first step. And I did a lot of work there. And that's when, during a lot of that work, I ended up finding the person that I ended up marrying. And we had a kid together.
Hmm.
And the second point was when she said, "Hey, you don't like your job. You should quit and we should move to Europe."
Hmm.
And we had just had a baby, right?
Hmm.
The brand new baby, and she's telling me to quit the job that's actually paying our bills and that we need to leave and move to Europe, right? No sane person or logical person would agree with this, but you know what? I was
Yeah.
like, all right, let's do this, right? After a couple months of contemplation, I was like, yeah, all right, I'm gonna
Hmm.
quit because I don't like it. And so we actually left for Europe with no agenda whatsoever, with a
Wow.
6 month old child,
Hmm.
with our savings, and that was it. We didn't
Wow.
know if we were going to move to Europe. We didn't know our future. We just went, and we had a blast for about 3 months.
Wow.
And then we decided we were missing our friends and family, and we came back to the States. And that's when I started my own job or my own company, because I didn't really want to work for anybody else.
Hmm.
And so that I kind of clump as to one moment in time that really changed the direction of my life. And then let's see, 5-ish, 6 years later, we're getting a divorce.
Hmm.
And I went to kind of the darkest point in my life, kind of ready to end it all. And honestly, if I hadn't had my son, I don't know if I would be here today.
Yeah. I can
Um,
say that
so
myself. Hmm.
yeah, it's
Oh.
he's definitely one main reason I'm sticking around.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's an amazing person. I can't wait to see how he grows up and what he becomes. And but it was during that dark point that I found some spirituality that really helped me out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was during a lot of that work, a lot of the spiritual side of me, that I found this idea for a new company teaching improv for
Mm-hmm.
corporations and groups of people to actually have them with a better communication, more fun in the environment that they're in, and all of the things that come with improv.
Yeah.
And that led to writing a whole bunch of books and me really just kind of diving in and exploring expectations. And the benefit of that for me is that it brings a lot more peace to my life,
Mm-hmm.
because if I understand that the only reason I'm getting upset is because of some expectation I had that's not happening,
Yeah.
I then get to explore, where's that expectation coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I get to tap back into that awareness training where I get to go back and say, why do I have that expectation? Is it my expectation, or did I grow up learning it that that's how it's supposed to be? And then I get to decide, is that going to work for me in the future, or should I do something different? And it's a very rewarding system that I've come up with. If nobody else, for me, but hopefully other people find it useful too. And I have gotten feedback from many people that absolutely love it and
Yeah.
they use it all the time. So,
I think, as you mentioned earlier, that you have to live in this awareness. You have to become a student of yourself. And as you
mhm.
said earlier, you have to learn what works, what doesn't work. And you get to that place by asking some serious questions, because the questions, you can't lie to yourself, because you know that you can't lie to yourself. And so you have to ask these real questions, and then you have to find yourself answering these questions. And then, as I mentioned, you can't lie, you can't BS yourself. So you have to go deep and really answer those questions. And as you answer those questions, you begin to realize that you have started this self awareness journey that people are always talking about. As you mentioned, you could start anytime, is just ask that first question of yourself when you are where you're at. And you had mentioned being in the dark place, and I tell people that I was brought up in the Christian faith. And when I read that Bible, it says that darkness was upon the face of the earth, and then God came and create. And I tell people, when darkness is in your life, start creating. And so I keep telling them that the process of creation is not bright lights first, it is darkness, and then you start to create. And your story, you talk about being in the darkness, and from that space you started creating. You created first a company. First you created the changes within yourself, then you created your company, then you started writing, you started creating that aspect. So I keep telling people, Ben, and a lot of people are afraid of the dark places. Ben, talk to them about your experience as of being in the dark places.
Yeah, I'm not, when I look back at it, it was a lot of expectations that went unmet all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, my parents are still married. They're having their 50th wedding anniversary next year.
Congrats,
And
man.
to make everyone jealous, yes, they are taking the family to Hawaii. So I'm like, this is great. I don't have to take them to Hawaii for their 50th. They're taking the family. So this is awesome.
Nice.
Right.
It's
No
beautiful.
complaints here. So, I grew up expecting to find the woman of my dreams in college because that's what my parents did. And
Mm-hmm.
then I expected to be married forever.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, that's what I grew up witnessing. So
Yeah.
that's in my world, that's what the world was supposed to look like. And so when I have this marriage that's no longer working and we're going to get a divorce, there was the kind of the shame of divorce because it was
Yeah.
kind of frowned upon
Uh-huh.
growing up. Even though over half the people that get married get divorced now, it's like
Yep.
more common than not. And so I had the shame, I had the being upset of the expectations that I had. It's just one thing after another was just kind of piling on, and here I am, like, okay, I'm going to be a single dad, or not single dad, but shared custody with this child that I absolutely love and adore. And, I'm not going to see him every day now. And, which as time has gone on has kind of been a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
I because I see a lot of parents who are like 10 years in with their kids and they're like, I never have time to do anything myself. I'm like, you guys really need to start talking, because it's kind of amazing being able to do whatever the heck you want for a week at a time.
Yeah.
um, so you can still do it within a marriage. It just takes a lot of communication.
Yeah.
And but anyway, it was just there were so many things just piling onto me that it took a while for me to kind of move things aside and sort them out. Uh, and it was kind of finding this spiritual path and meditation, and really just letting go that really helped me sort through it and bring some light into this situation. So at the time, it's a lot harder to see those things, but
Oh yeah.
afterwards, when you're looking back, it's much easier to see, oh, that's why I was upset about that, and this is what was going on for me then. And the reason that typically is the case is that if you're having an emotional problem, you're not really able to solve it emotionally.
Hmm.
Einstein says you can't solve a problem at the same level it was created. And
Hmm.
one interpretation of that statement is not solving an emotional problem emotionally. Sometimes if we're upset with something, we'll go exercise
Hmm.
and we'll feel better.
Feel better.
If we're upset with somebody, we might go and meditate or do something
Hmm.
spiritual to feel better. We're doing it at a different level
Yeah.
than it was created. And so like my book with expectations, I solve the emotional problem of being upset through a mental process,
Hmm.
because it's easier to take your self out and just look at these. There's a flow chart in there. Just kind of go through
Hmm.
that flow chart and say, where is the disconnect for me within this world of expectations, and is that going to make it easier for me to solve that issue? And usually it is. And
Hmm.
so that's where, when I was in this emotional state, going to the spiritual route really helped, because it was not trying to solve it emotionally.
Yeah, I try to tell people, as you mentioned about the expectation. I remember with my son, and I actually had to learn this lesson about expectation. And this is where I learned it was when one of my sons came to me, and something had happened in his life that I was hoping that would never happen in any of my children's life. And I began to look at, I was hurt. And I began to look at that and go, why? Why am I hurt? I mean, he should be more hurt than I am. Why am I concerned about that? And it was my expectation. And I realized I started to ask that question as to why is that there? And it was there because it happened to me, and I didn't want this to happen to my kid because I was trying, my children, my boys, I wanted to protect them. And the expectation was I fail, and all the other piling on, as you mentioned, on that expectation. And it was in the midst of that mess that a phrase came across my mind: compassionate detachment. And I remember when that thing came to me at that time, I was doing my meditation now for about maybe about 5 or 6 years. And so I took this phrase and I went into my meditation and start meditating on what the heck does that thing mean. And it was there, Ben, that I got the revelation of the compassionate detachment, which unhooked me from the expectations. And so I can look at someone and have compassion on them, even myself, but be detached from the actions that cause them to do certain things. My responsibility is to love that person and to be there for that person. I don't have to have all this type of expectation. And so that compassionate detachment took me a year to learn. And like you said, it's not you don't come out of your situation in 10 minutes, man. It's 4 years, a year, 3 years, 5 years. I mean, it takes time for you to, because in most cases, Ben, we're stubborn and we're dumb in the sense of some aspect of our, whether that four parts of the human, we're foolish in parts of that. And so we have to learn and become a better student in each area of that individuality as we are.
Yeah. And something that I always tell people is no matter how much work you do on yourself to get rid of things in your past that don't work for you, the voice is always going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's addiction or I am a failure, whatever the voice is, um, you can do a lot of work to have a bigger, stronger voice in your corner, but that other
Mm-hmm.
voice isn't going away.
Yeah.
Even 20 years later, it might rear its ugly head and say, I'm still here. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, that's fine that you're still here, but this guy's over here and he's much louder than you. So go away.
Yes.
Um, and that's what we want. We want to build the new cheerleaders
Mm-hmm.
rather than fight the old ones.
Yes.
We want to build up the new ones because they're going to be stronger and better. And I think once people realize that it's not possible to get rid of those past voices that we have in our heads, and the past demons, if you want to call them that, there's no way to get rid of them. They're
Mm-hmm.
always going to be around. It's just whether we ignore them, and keep them in the corner, put them in a closet, make sure that
Mm-hmm.
their voice is as silent as possible,
Yeah.
is all that we can really do. And the best way to do that is to create new voices. So,
I absolutely agree because we empowered them in the past, and so we
mhm.
have to create these new voices and empower them instead. Give them the power as we become more and more studious about ourselves as we begin to rip away all the layers, as they say, the onions. The different layers of that onion, and we're getting to that core by simply every time situation comes and we strip away a little more, ask a little deeper of a question. And what turns me on is to see a person like yourself, people who are students of themselves. I think that to me is some of the most beautiful set of people on the planet because they're interested in learning. They're interested in understanding why am I reacting this way? Why not this way? And begin to question that and begin to ask. And then as they learn about themselves, you come back 5, 10 minutes later, and they're changed. It's that quick. Once you realize something, you make that, and you have an understanding, though, Ben. It's just like I said, and when we started this thing, we were like foolish bunch of kids just running around until we began to get a better understanding. And as we become more and more studious, like when you had to learn flying, you had to become a student to learn that. And we've been taught through school that the gravity is the strongest thing. And then when you went to the flying school, they tell you, no, gravity is not the strongest thing. There's another thing called the flight, the law of flight that overpowers the gravity if you do certain things and maintain that. And so if you don't maintain it, then you will crash and burn. Just like I use it as a metaphor for life, Ben, because it truly is to me. The plane aspect is a metaphor for life because once you're up in the air, you have to initiate and constantly have that awareness all the time when you're flying. And so, it is. I use that analogy a lot of flying as a metaphor for life. As a pilot, give us some insight as to some of the things that you do when you're flying that you do have to be aware and be in that awareness as life is.
Yeah, the I'm gonna tell the story of the first time that I was flying on my own,
Mm-hmm.
because it equates to life. Where you've got the instructor in the side seat, and that's kind of like the parent teaching you how to
Mm-hmm.
live life, and the flying is life. Well, we land one day after doing some things, and he's like, "All right, pull to the side." He gets out, and I'm like, "We're not back at the hangar. What's going on?" He's like, "You're gonna go by yourself," and I was like, well, I'm gonna what? I'm gonna go by myself? What?" Right? It was like kicking the bird out of the nest, saying, "You got to go do this," right? Or the parent saying, "All right, you're going out here for a week on your own."
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of scary when you're a kid and you're going like to camp for the first time for a week, or
Oh,
you're being left
definitely.
home alone for the
Yeah.
first time, whatever it might be. And he said, "Go take a lap," and I was like, I was just I didn't know what to do, but I was like I was still in the zone, so I went.
Mm-hmm.
And takeoff is no big deal. Taking
Mm-hmm.
off in an airplane is no big deal. It's not really scary. It's pretty easy to do. Flying around is pretty easy to do, but when it was like time to land,
Mm-hmm.
was the biggest realization in my life. I'm like, my instructor is not here. It is me and the plane. I have to
Hmm.
land this or I'm dead. There's no other choice. It's land or death. There's and when faced with that, it was like the most real, nothing else mattered moments in time. It was me and the plane and right now.
Hmm.
There was nothing else to think about.
Yeah.
I didn't have to think about family. I didn't have to think about job. It was like I am here in this moment right now and I have one job to do.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's huge with life because if we don't live in the moment, we're either afraid of what may happen, which almost never happens,
Hmm.
and or we're resenting the past and there's nothing we can do about that except learn from it.
Hmm.
And the power of living in the moment is so
Yeah.
so huge. I mean, plenty of authors have talked about it. I've talked about it in my books.
Yeah.
it's
Same.
it's a huge thing for people, and that I landed. I'm here and it was awesome and amazing. But that was probably the most alive I ever felt
Hmm.
because I
Yeah.
was I was
Uh,
more in that moment than any other time in my entire life.
I'm sure you are when when faced between life and death, and I keep telling people the key to it all of this thing, as you said, you and I talk about, and other people talk about. You hear writers talk about it, hear philosophers talk about it. I've heard uh, gurus talk about it, sages. I've heard everyone, martial arts people, everybody that I've come across, and all of them says the same thing: living in the moment. Because as you said, if you're living in the past, is no good. If you're living worried about the future, there's nothing there. So if you live here, then you're focused on what's happening right now. You're focused on your feelings. You're focusing on your thoughts. And I keep telling them that that thought life of theirs becomes valuable. You have to learn how to master your thoughts, because if you don't know how to master your thoughts, when you're in the darkness, Ben, it becomes bigger and darker until you begin to start mastering your thoughts and says, wait a minute, I can control this. And I tell them, once you start doing that, the next thing to do is take one step. Just take one step. Don't worry about, you know, 10 years down the road. Just take one step. I'm going to get up. And once you make that step, you have start that process of momentum.
Absolutely. And yeah, all the greats. I mean, everybody in the personal growth world, they're all saying the exact same thing, just in a different way.
Yeah.
And I'm no exception. I've used improv as my kind of encapsulation of personal growth. And so
Hmm.
I'm saying it in a different way that people might be able to understand it. There are some people who absolutely love Tony Robbins, and there are people that absolutely can't stand Tony Robbins, but
Hmm.
they like somebody else who is basically saying the same
The
thing,
same thing.
just in a slightly different way.
Hmm.
And and that's the beauty of personal growth is there's no one solution fits all. It's like however you find personal growth to work for you, do it. If that's reading books and practicing what's in the books, great. If it's going to a seminar, great. If it's doing improv, great. I mean, just as long as somebody is moving forward in their life,
Hmm.
I don't see any drawback.
Yeah.
It's when they decide to, in my book, if you're upset, that's great. It's an opportunity for growth because if you
Hmm.
recognize it for what it is, you can do something with it. It's the people that decide to get upset and stay there for months and years and decades, and it just doesn't serve them. They get nothing out of life by being upset for long periods of time. And so yeah, whatever outlet works for you for personal growth, I say go for it.
Same here.
Absolutely go for it.
That's why I have different people coming to Threads of Enlightenment. As I mentioned to you, my belief system is that we all individually have our process to go through our threads, and then interdependently we come together. Your thread, Anthony's thread, and all the different people's threads. We put this thing together, and we kind of depend on each other. I may not like Anthony, as you say, but you like someone. Someone may not like me, but they like how Ben presented and talks about it. And our intention is that, as Ben says, you take it and start start your steps, get moving, so that you can be on either my show or Ben's show and talking about it, or about this process that we've all stumbled upon after we've gone through some darkness. But Ben, I want you to talk to them a little about, go a little more in depth with expectation. I know your chart. I've seen it. I've read it, but I want you to give them a little teasy. I know you don't have to give them all of it. I want you guys to get and go and buy Ben's books and so forth. But if you can just give them a little of the process, how you start and where the branches are, for them to get a chance to begin to learn how to not be dominated by their expectation.
Yeah, so I always start at the top with at the moment in time when you're upset. It's a great trigger point, a great opportunity for growth. And I think as long as we're willing to take a step back when we're upset and say, hey, did I know I had an expectation? And most of the time, we don't realize we had the expectation until it's going unmet.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like when we wake up in the morning, we expect the electricity to be on. It is an expectation we have. And we
Mm-hmm.
don't realize we have it until we wake up in the morning and the electricity is out.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're like, what the heck is happening? Why? Oh, this is not how my morning is supposed to start, right?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't expect that to be a thing.
Yeah.
And just like that, there's deeper and more subtle issues that come up for us when we get upset. And so the first question really is, did you know you had the expectation? If you did, great, you're one step ahead. But if not, this is an opportunity for you to explore where that expectation came from, why you have it, and does it serve you? Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we'll get expectations from when we're young and our parents were still learning how to be a parent. And so
Yeah.
maybe they got it wrong,
Yep.
but they did the best that they could. And now here you are with the same choice as your parents. Now you have to choose, is this, am I going to make the same choice that my parents made or choose differently?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's right there. You can kind of stop yourself just by exploring what that expectation is, and from there, there's questions like, is this a reasonable expectation? I always talk about traffic for myself because my expectation that everybody knows how to drive is completely unreasonable. I mean, one would say it's reasonable because we all have to take tests
Yeah.
and pass and get our license, so everybody should know how to drive,
Yeah.
but everybody's interpretation of the rules are slightly different,
Yes.
and how we act on the road, it's all different. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's unreasonable for me to have that expectation because at the end of the day, you have to be able to communicate with the person or persons involved with
Yeah.
your expectation so that you can get on the same page, so you can
Mm-hmm.
understand their expectation, and so on and so forth. And because there's millions and millions and millions of people on the road, there's no way I can talk to them and have them talk to me so that we understand each other. It's so
Mm-hmm.
right there, I can just say traffic's going to be what traffic is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can choose not to be upset. And I used to go an entire trip being upset about traffic because of one incident. And now it's
Mm-hmm.
about 5 seconds that I'm
Mm-hmm.
upset. And that's because I'm following my own process.
Yeah.
But you have to keep in mind that not only do you have expectations, but the people around you have their own expectations. And
Yeah.
until you talk to each other and understand each other, it's never going to work out anyway,
Mm-hmm.
because your expectations and their expectations may or may not align. And most of the time, they're not going to.
Yeah.
And so you have to actually talk and negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's this new phrase that gets thrown around. It's called communication. Um, we really suck
Yeah.
at it as
Yeah.
people lately.
We
Even though
sure
we
do.
have text messages and emails, we
I
suck at
know.
communicating lately. But it's vital for human survival and peace of mind.
Yeah, I you had mentioned I used to teach on this thing called condition response, and you had
Mm,
touched a little on it, that we are so programmed that based on these condition and we respond accordingly. And I use the example of you're driving in a car and you're minding your own business, and you see the cop car behind you, and your first instinct is to hit the brakes, and you're not doing anything wrong. You're just, you just happen to look up and there the cop is. But you and I have been conditioned. We have been somewhat programmed. And because we are programmed, whether it's by our society, whether it's parents, whether it's friends, school, church, whatever it is, we have been programmed. And so, what we do when we begin to start this journey of self awareness is begin to ask those questions as to why am I responding based on this program that I have. And as we begin to investigate it, as you were saying, in some cases it could be a program that was planted into your computer by your parents because of their lack of understanding, or maybe a grandparent or a teacher may have said something that had planted into your computer and, as they say, corrupted your file. And you have to learn how to take life and the questions and become a technician and undo all the corruption that is in that computer that is you. And so it's a beautiful journey. I keep telling people this thing is beautiful. It's messy, but it is beautiful. And they tend to believe that this journey is like just tip to tulips kind of crazy stuff that is not a reality. If you sit down with people that have gone through, and I've sat down with some, I love having conversations with the older generation, Ben, and you paint their brains and you see the richness that this thing is dirty and messy, but it truly is a beautiful thing because I'm sure, Ben, you look back 10 years of yourself in your life and go, wow, the guy back there was a mess, you know, and, but today you're here, and 10 years from now, where you are sitting down with me, you're going to go, wow, that guy was a mess. you,
Exactly.
you know? And so it's messy, but it's beautiful, man. What do you think, man?
I couldn't agree more with all of what you just said. I mean, the programming is huge. We sometimes don't even realize that we have the programming until it's staring us in the face.
Yeah.
You have no idea how you were parented until you're a parent yourself.
Oh, yeah, that
That's
is,
one of those
yes,
things.
sir.
You don't until you're paying your own bills. You have no idea what thought processes went through your parents' heads
Yeah.
growing up with putting food on the table and paying the bills and all of that sort of thing because you have no frame of reference.
Yes.
And yeah, looking back on any 2, 3, 5, 7 year period, you're like, wow, what happened during that time? Um, I look at any 7 year period, and there was never ever a time where I was accurate as to what life was going to look like 7 years later.
Yeah.
If somebody would have said 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago now, um, Ben, would you be an author of multiple books? I had been like, no, I barely like reading, except now I love reading and I'm actually working on writing a sci-fi novel. So,
Nice.
go figure.
Congrats, man.
Um, yeah, yet another thing I'm working on. It's like, oh, he's just writing a sci-fi novel, whatever. But yeah, it's I'm out there living life as it's coming. Some parts are intentional for sure, and other
Hmm.
parts are just magic moments that come to me, and it's just it's amazing to watch life unfold, and I think as you work on the awareness training, it unfolds a little bit more easily as time goes on
Yeah.
because you're more aware of what is coming,
Hmm.
and you can start seeing the patterns before they play themselves out because you've done a lot of that awareness training over time. So you just got to start somewhere, and it's not always pretty. It's sometimes messy. It's sometimes mucky and gross, and it feels bad. But as we live in a world, the desert doesn't go on forever,
Yeah.
and the trees do thin out, and the flowers do bloom. It's you just got to keep going.
Keep going. Everything is seasonal, I tell them. Even there's one Chinese proverbs that I always say, everything in moderation, including moderation. So um,
I
you
know, I love
have
that one.
to, just be open to life, man, and open to the beauty that it brings. And lots of times it's an unintentional thing. I remember walking down I was in traveling several years ago, and I was walking this little alleyway in Turkey, and I'm walking, and this bunch of people are just singing in in their Turkish language, and I'm walking there with my girlfriend, and they whistled and called us and tell us to come on over, and we went over and sat down, and it was this beautiful thing that just happened unintentionally. They knew broken English, and we were trying to communicate. There, it was so beautiful that it made me fell in love deeply, even more so with Turkey. And so those are the things that happen, Ben. It happens while you're walking in the alley, you know. So, and such is life. You are the beauty of life. One of my gurus had said, "Let life disturb your comfort," and so life will come in and disturb your comfort. And I keep telling people, comfort is one of the most is the enemy to. If you understand life, you'll see that comfort is one of the enemies that you have to be aware of, because if you keep moving, you'll understand what we're talking about.
For sure.
So. But I want to thank you, Ben, for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. I love your story. I want people that are listening to us go and track Ben. I'm going to provide his information because he can help you through some of his books to learn about the process of coming out from where you are and coming out. He talked about learning the different aspects of who you are, the four corners of an individual. I want you to go to Ben and pick his brain. I am going to make sure I have his information so that you could touch him and buy his books, purchase his books. I always tell people that a book is Ben sitting down. Once you buy that book and you're reading, is that you're having this personal conversation with Ben. You are getting to have this exchange with him as you read the wisdom that he has in those five books, and he's working on his sixth one. So whenever you're reading it, is that you're sitting down personally with Ben, and you're getting insight, you're getting revelation, you're having a conversation with him. And so I suggest that you go and purchase his books and have that conversation. And Ben, I want to thank you for coming by truly and spending time with us, man.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. This has been great.
I'm so glad that you got a chance to go back and tell us all the good stories, especially the one landing that plane.
That was a yeah. That's one of those times I'll never forget.
And I want to close it with this, with that story that Ben talked about. That is the power of living in the moment. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, sir. You have a good day, and thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks again for having me.
All right. Everyone who's listening to this podcast, we hope to continually help you to learn how to embrace moments of darkness, because it is in the darkness that we learn how to develop and use our abilities to truly see those parts of ourselves, often invisible to us, in the light. It becomes your responsibility to navigate through all of your trials, to find out who you truly are and begin your journey to loving yourself, which is possibly one of the most difficult things you will ever do in your life. To love yourself and to find the real you, but always remember to enjoy the journey. Thank you for coming by. Please subscribe, and if you can support us financially, we deeply appreciate it.